Hello everyone, and welcome to my Beyond the Gates official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Izaiah was arrested in connection with a murder in Las Vegas 2 years ago, a truth buried beneath layers of reinvention, charm, calculated silence, and carefully curated lies. A truth that once unearthed does not merely shock the characters who orbit his life, but fundamentally reframes every interaction, every promise, every tender glance, and every moment of apparent vulnerability he has shared since stepping into Fairmont Crest, because this is not simply a scandal about a past crime but a psychological earthquake that ripples through love, loyalty, power, and identity, forcing everyone, from Eva to Vernon, from Sharon to Tracy, from Nicole to the unsuspecting families who trusted him, to confront the terrifying possibility that the man they thought they knew never truly existed at all. As the storyline opens with a quiet but ominous beat, a federal database quietly pinging during a routine background check requested under a false pretense, a single red flag that grows into a siren, revealing that 2 years earlier, under a different name and a different life, Izaiah had been detained, questioned, and briefly charged in Las Vegas following the brutal murder of a nightclub promoter found dead in a luxury suite off the Strip, a case that at the time collapsed under insufficient evidence and a mysteriously uncooperative witness, allowing Izaiah to walk free, disappear, and resurface months later in an entirely new city with a new narrative, new ambitions, and a woman, Eva, who believed she was falling in love with a complicated but fundamentally decent man, unaware that every romantic gesture was layered atop a foundation of fear and unresolved guilt. And as the present-day story unfolds, the revelation detonates not all at once but in fragments, beginning with Eva sensing a shift in Izaiah's behavior as soon as Vegas is mentioned casually at a fundraiser, the way his jaw tightens, the way his eyes skin exits, the way his voice drops just a fraction too low. Subtle cues that mean nothing until they suddenly mean everything, because when the truth finally comes out, through Tracy's relentless digging and refusal to accept half-answers, it is not delivered as a confession but as an exposure, a confrontation staged in the most public and humiliating way possible, when Tracy corners Izaiah with documents, booking photos, and a sealed police report that should not exist, forcing him into silence as the room fills with people whose lives he has touched. And in that silence lies the most damning confirmation of all, because Izaiah does not deny it. He does not rage. He does not deflect. He simply closes his eyes as if bracing for a long-delayed impact, and that reaction alone shatters Eva, whose world collapses in real time as she realizes the man she defended, the man she trusted, the man she planned a future with, may have been capable of something unspeakable. And the writing leans heavily into ambiguity, refusing to immediately clarify whether Izaiah is a killer, an accomplice, or a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, instead allowing suspicion to metastasize, because Beyond the Gates understands that the most devastating drama lives in uncertainty, in the space where truth and lies blur. And as law enforcement reopens the case, revealing that new evidence has surfaced tying Izaiah's DNA to the crime scene, the narrative reframes his entire arc as one long act of survival, a man who has spent 2 years running not just from the law but from himself, building a new identity brick by brick while knowing that one crack could bring the entire structure down, and that crack becomes a chasm when Eva, unable to reconcile love with danger, flees in terror, not because she knows he is guilty, but because she realizes she will never truly know if he is innocent, and that realization is more frightening than any confession. As the show intercuts flashbacks of Vegas, neon lights, thumping bass, champagne spilling across marble floors, with present-day scenes of interrogation rooms and whispered accusations, creating a haunting visual contrast between the man Izaiah was and the man he pretended to be, while supporting characters are pulled into the vortex, with Vernon recognizing the strategic threat Izaiah now poses to the family's reputation, Sharon panicking over potential legal exposure tied to old financial favors, and Nicole grappling with the moral weight of having vouched for someone who may have blood on his hands. all while Tracy emerges as both antagonist and reluctant truth-teller, driven less by righteousness than by an obsessive need to prove she was right all along, which complicates the audience's response because even as she exposes a possible murderer, her motives remain deeply flawed, and the show smartly avoids simplistic binaries, painting Izaiah neither as a cartoon villain nor as a misunderstood hero but as a deeply fractured man whose past choices have finally caught up to him. A man whose charisma once felt magnetic now reads as manipulative, whose silences once felt thoughtful now feel calculated, and whose love once felt genuine now exists under a cloud of doubt. And when Izaiah is formally arrested in the present timeline, handcuffed outside a courthouse, as cameras flash and whispers turn into headlines, the moment lands not as a triumphant victory for justice, but as a collective reckoning, because everyone who believed in him must now question their own judgment, their own complicity, their own willingness to ignore red flags for the sake of comfort, and the writing underscores this by giving Izaiah a rare moment of raw honesty in a holding cell, where he admits, not to murder, but to fear, to running, to choosing reinvention over accountability, confessing that he convinced himself that if he could become someone else long enough, the past would lose its power. A belief that now lies in ruins as detectives reveal that the Vegas murder may be linked to a larger criminal network, suggesting that Izaiah's involvement could be deeper and more dangerous than anyone imagined, raising the stakes beyond personal betrayal into the realm of organized crime and systemic corruption. And as the storyline stretches forward, the consequences multiply, with Eva torn between wanting answers and wanting distance, with families fracturing under the weight of association, with secrets once thought unrelated suddenly aligning into a larger pattern of deceit, and with the central question looming over every episode, is Izaiah a man haunted by a crime he did not commit, or a man who has successfully hidden the truth for 2 years until his mask finally slipped? A question the show deliberately withholds answering, allowing tension to build through courtroom maneuvers, surprise witnesses, and morally compromised alliances, while thematically interrogating the idea of second chances in America, the myth of self-reinvention, and the uncomfortable reality that not all pasts stay buried, no matter how far you run or how convincingly you perform redemption, and in doing so, Beyond the Gates transforms what could have been a simple shock twist into a sprawling, emotionally charged meditation on identity, guilt, and the cost of secrets, proving once again that its greatest strength lies not in sensational headlines but in the story pushes even further into darker, more psychologically complex territory as Beyond the Gates uses Izaiah's Vegas murder arrest, not just as a plot engine, but as a mirror held up to every character who has ever rewritten their own past, because once the legal machinery grinds forward, the emotional machinery accelerates even faster, exposing how deeply interconnected these lives truly are. And as new episodes unfold, the narrative begins to suggest that Izaiah's arrival in Fairmont Crest was never entirely random, planting subtle clues that he may have chosen this community precisely because of the kind of people who live there, people with influence, secrets, and a shared understanding that power often matters more than truth. And this realization reframes him not merely as a man on the run, but as a strategist who understood how to embed himself among those who would be least likely to ask the wrong questions, a theory that terrifies Vernon when he begins to suspect that Izaiah's relationships were not formed out of coincidence or affection alone, but out of calculated necessity, prompting him to quietly mobilize damage control behind the scenes, calling in favors, suppressing records, and attempting to steer the narrative away from the family's doorstep, even as Sharon unravels under the pressure. Haunted by the possibility that something she signed years ago in good faith may now be reinterpreted as complicity, and the show takes time to explore how fear manifests differently in each character, with Vernon growing colder and more authoritarian, Sharon oscillating between denial and panic, and Nicole retreating into a moral paralysis that alienates those closest to her, while Tracy, fueled by the chaos she helped unleash, becomes increasingly reckless, mistaking momentum for righteousness as she pursues the truth with a tunnel vision that blinds her to the collateral damage she is causing, particularly to Eva, whose emotional descent becomes one of the most heartbreaking arcs in the series as she grapples not only with betrayal, but with the terrifying erosion of her own sense of judgment, questioning whether she ignored warning signs because she wanted the love Izaiah offered or because part of her recognized the darkness in him and believed she could outrun it. And this self-doubt becomes a central emotional thread as she attends therapy sessions intercut with stark interrogation scenes, visually reinforcing the idea that trauma does not always announce itself loudly but seeps in quietly, reshaping perception and memory. While Izaiah himself grows more unpredictable in custody, alternating between moments of chilling calm and explosive frustration, his conversations laced with half-truths and cryptic warnings that suggest the Vegas murder is only one piece of a much larger puzzle, and when he finally tells his lawyer that the wrong man died that night, the line lands with devastating ambiguity, implying either tragic accident or deliberate orchestration, and the writers intentionally refuse to clarify which, allowing suspicion to metastasize across the narrative, infecting even those who want desperately to believe in his innocence, and as prosecutors build their case, uncovering financial trails that connect Vegas nightlife money to offshore accounts and shell companies with familiar names attached. The show begins to expose the systemic rot beneath the surface of privilege, suggesting that Izaiah's greatest crime may not have been violence but knowledge, positioning him as someone who knows too much about the wrong people, which raises the chilling possibility that his arrest is less about justice and more about silencing, and this idea fractures alliances as characters are forced to choose between protecting themselves and risking everything to uncover the truth. And nowhere is this tension more pronounced than in Eva's eventual decision to return, not to Izaiah, but to the fight for clarity, when she agrees to testify, not about the murder, but about the man she knew, delivering testimony that is devastating precisely because of its honesty, admitting that she does not know if he is a killer but knows with certainty that he is a man capable of profound deception, a statement that reverberates through the courtroom and into the audience, because it encapsulates the core tragedy of the storyline, that sometimes the most damning truths are not about what someone did, but about who they chose to be, and as the season edges toward its climax, it becomes clear that no outcome, conviction, acquittal, or mistrial, will restore what has been lost, because the exposure of Izaiah's past has permanently altered the moral landscape of Beyond the Gates, stripping away the illusion that reinvention guarantees redemption and forcing every character to confront the uncomfortable reality that secrets do not disappear when buried. They wait, they grow, and eventually, they demand to be seen, ensuring that long after the verdict is read, the consequences of a murder in Vegas 2 years ago will continue to haunt Fairmont Crest, not as a closed chapter, but as a wound that reshapes every relationship, every ambition, and every lie told in the name of survival. The aftermath stretches beyond the courtroom and into the soul of Beyond the Gates, where the narrative begins to interrogate not only what happened in Las Vegas 2 years ago, but why that moment has such gravitational pull over the present. Because as the trial inches forward, the story widens its lens to reveal that Izaiah's past is less a single incident and more a chain reaction, each choice leading inexorably to the next. And the writers take deliberate care to show how the Vegas murder becomes a kind of moral litmus test for everyone involved, exposing who believes in justice, who believes in loyalty, and who believes only in self-preservation, as Vernon's behind-the-scenes maneuvers grow increasingly ruthless, signaling a man who has crossed from damage control into outright manipulation, quietly pressuring witnesses and leveraging old debts in a desperate attempt to keep certain names out of the proceedings, while Sharon, unraveling under the strain, begins to experience moments of clarity that terrify her even more than ignorance, realizing that she has spent years benefiting from a system that allows men like Izaiah to disappear and reappear at will, and that this realization forces her to confront her own reflection in his story, a reckoning that manifests in sleepless nights, sharp exchanges, and a growing sense that her marriage itself may not survive the truth. And as these personal crises unfold, the show intercuts them with haunting flashbacks that finally illuminate the night of the murder with unsettling intimacy, Vegas at its most seductive and most predatory, where excess masks desperation and violence feels like an inevitable byproduct of unchecked ambition. And in these fragments, Izaiah is no longer the controlled figure audiences know, but a man cornered by forces larger than himself, surrounded by powerful players who treat human life as collateral, suggesting that the murder may have been the consequence of a deal gone wrong rather than a singular act of rage. Yet even this context does not absolve him, because the flashbacks also reveal moments where he could have walked away and chose not to, choices that haunt him in the present as he sits alone in his cell, replaying not just the crime but the instant he decided survival mattered more than truth. And this internal conflict reaches a breaking point when a former Vegas associate is found dead under suspicious circumstances, reigniting public outrage and casting a long shadow over Izaiah's case, raising the chilling implication that someone is still cleaning up loose ends, a development that sends shockwaves through Fairmont Crest as characters begin to wonder whether exposing the truth has made them targets, and Eva's fear returns, sharper and more visceral, not just of Izaiah but of the world he may have dragged her into, a world where love becomes leverage and silence becomes currency. And yet, even in her fear, she evolves, transforming from a woman running from danger into one determined to understand it, refusing to let the narrative reduce her to collateral damage. And this evolution becomes one of the most powerful arcs of the season as she confronts Izaiah during a jailhouse visit that strips away all pretense, where she demands honesty not as a lover, but as a witness, and his response, an admission that he stopped telling the truth long before Vegas, because lies were the only language power ever responded to, lands as both confession and indictment of a culture that rewards reinvention over accountability. And the show allows this moment to breathe, refusing melodrama in favor of quiet devastation, as Eva walks away knowing that closure may never come, and as the trial reaches its most volatile stage, with surprise evidence and shifting alliances threatening to collapse the case entirely, Beyond the Gates makes its boldest statement yet, suggesting that the real crime is not just murder, but the collective willingness to look away when truth is inconvenient. And whether Izaiah is ultimately convicted or not becomes almost secondary to the irreversible transformation his past has triggered, because Fairmont Crest is no longer a place of polished facades and whispered secrets, but a battleground where every character must decide what they are willing to sacrifice to protect the life they have built. And in this way, the revelation of Izaiah's arrest in connection with a murder in Vegas 2 years ago transcends plot, becoming a thematic reckoning that redefines the series itself, reminding viewers that some stories do not end with a verdict, and some sins do not belong to one person alone, but to everyone who benefited from the silence that allowed them to endure. As the story deepens, Beyond the Gates continues to explore the cascading consequences of Izaiah's Vegas murder arrest, emphasizing that no character remains untouched by the revelation, because the past, once unearthed, does not simply sit in isolation. It infiltrates every relationship, every decision, every whispered conversation behind closed doors. And the series meticulously chronicles how the ripple effect of one man's hidden history destabilizes the fragile equilibrium of Fairmont Crest, forcing each resident to confront their own complicity, vulnerability, and morality. And the tension is heightened by the show's signature use of interwoven timelines, where present-day investigations intersect with flashbacks that gradually reveal the full scope of Izaiah's life before arrival, painting a portrait of a man whose charm, intelligence, and calculated charisma were as much survival mechanisms as they were weapons, and whose ability to manipulate perception made him simultaneously compelling and dangerous, a duality that keeps both the characters and the audience in a state of uneasy fascination, while Eva, still reeling from betrayal and fear, embarks on a parallel journey of self-discovery, seeking to understand not only who Izaiah truly is but why she was drawn into his orbit. And her journey is complicated by encounters with individuals who offer fragmented truths, some sympathetic, others duplicitous, creating a narrative maze where trust is scarce and certainty is almost impossible to attain. And as legal proceedings advance, new layers of intrigue emerge, Lawyers uncover inconsistencies in witness testimonies. Financial investigators trace suspicious money flows linking Izaiah to unsavory Vegas figures, and subtle hints suggest that the murder may have been part of a broader criminal network, elevating the stakes from a single case to a potentially systemic corruption. While characters like Vernon and Sharon find themselves scrambling to protect not just their reputations, but their entire way of life, realizing that the web Izaiah has woven around them is far more intricate and dangerous than they initially suspected, and Tracy, ever the relentless pursuer of the truth, leverages every new development to maintain pressure, yet the writers skillfully depict her obsession as a double-edged sword, because while she uncovers critical evidence, she simultaneously destabilizes relationships and fuels paranoia, turning allies into adversaries and magnifying the tension. And within this maelstrom, the show continues to examine themes of identity, morality, and the consequences of deception, as viewers witness Izaiah grappling with the burden of living a life that has been built on lies, where every interaction carries the potential for exposure, and even small moments, an unguarded glance, a nervous hesitation, a whispered word, become loaded with meaning, suggesting both guilt and self-preservation, and the narrative uses these subtleties to maintain suspense, ensuring that the audience constantly questions whether Izaiah is a victim of circumstance, a master manipulator, or something in between, while Eva, caught between fear, love, and the desire for justice, must navigate a landscape where the line between right and wrong has been blurred by the complexity of human motives, and as she begins to engage with law enforcement and independent investigators, the series highlights the emotional and psychological toll of becoming entwined with someone whose past is so perilous that even proximity poses a threat, and the courtroom sequences are crafted to amplify this tension, where each testimony, cross-examination, and revelation chips away at the veneer of certainty, forcing everyone, including the audience, to confront uncomfortable truths about truth itself, the nature of accountability, and the ways in which the past inevitably collides with the present. And as new episodes unfold, the show continues to layer intrigue, emotional turmoil, and moral ambiguity, ensuring that Izaiah's Vegas arrest remains not merely a plot device, but the central axis around which every dramatic and ethical dilemma revolves, reinforcing Beyond the Gates' reputation as a series that explores not only the thrill of suspense, but the deeper human consequences of secrets, lies, and the desperate, sometimes destructive, lengths people go to protect themselves, their loved ones, and the lives they have painstakingly constructed, while navigating a world where the past, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to reassert itself.